Welcome to the Kennel Connection training video on creating and managing appointments in Kennel Connection 6. In this video, we'll be taking a look at how to create appointments, some of the settings in the system for appointments, and how to manage and keep track of them in the Kennel Connection 6 program. First, we're going to take a look at some of the settings that are involved with creating and managing appointments during the initial setup of Kennel Connection. First, we're going to go to the File tab in the upper left-hand corner, and then in the Setup section, select Business Info. In the Business Information section, we're going to select the Email tab. Here we have the option to set up our email settings. Our outgoing server information is entered in order to allow us to send emails through Kennel Connection. When creating appointments in Kennel Connection, you have the option under the Email tab, under each module tab, to set automatic appointment confirmation emails for each individual module. We also have the option to send thank you emails upon checkout for each individual module. Other settings in here include displaying in and out times on confirmations and vaccination status, or having copies of the confirmation emails sent to your company email. And you can also set up additional wording to attach to these confirmation emails under each module tab. And you can set up your special email for thank yous under the special emails. Next to the Email tab is Operating Hours. If you desire, you can set up your business hours in the Operating Hours section. And by checking the Enforce Operating Hours option, you can prevent Kennel Connection from scheduling any reservations that fall outside of that time frame. Next, in the System Options section, we're going to look at some of the settings that you can apply to individual modules that will affect how you create and manage appointments. Under the Global tab, we have the option to require initials on bookings, which will require employees to enter their initials when creating a reservation. If you're going to have customers call you to confirm reservations, and you're going to mark reservations as confirmed in the schedule, you can choose to have a confirmation number randomly generated. Enable editable service grids on bookings allows you to type in new feedings, exercises, or medications when adding services to a reservation, and adding it automatically to the list section without having to exit the reservation. The Enable Multiple Pet Bookings option allows you to choose multiple pets to create a reservation if the customer only owns more than one pet. Track deleted reservations will allow deleted reservations to remain on the schedule in gray, where you can then either rebook them or delete them again to permanently remove them from the schedule. Next to the Global tab, you should see a tab for each module you have running in Kennel Connection 6. Each module tab will have settings specific to that individual module, as well as settings that you can alter individually between each module. Some common settings that you will find on most, if not all, of the module tabs are set in date and set in time as blank. When these boxes are not checked, when you are creating a reservation in Kennel Connection, the reservation will always populate a default time and date. The date will most usually be the date currently showing on the schedule. If you want the person creating the reservations to have to enter the time and date manually, checking these boxes will result in the date and time showing as blank when creating reservations. You also have the option in each module to adjust in and out times on pet check in and out. When this is checked, the scheduled in and out time on a reservation will change automatically to the time showing on your computer when you check the pet in and out. This is an especially important setting if you have board settings set up, charging different rates based on drop-off and pickup times, or if you are using daycare packages and have the half-day packages option enabled. Some module tabs, such as the Daycare tab, will also give you the option to choose what shows on the schedule. If we go down here to the Show on Schedule section, we can choose whether or not we want certain columns to appear on our daycare schedule. So if you are not using daycare packages, or you don't really use the notes option when creating reservations, you can uncheck these and the column will not appear on the schedule when you open it. Under the Grooming tab, we have the option to limit the number of appointments created for specific grooming services based on either the individual groomer or based on appointments for the entire facility. When choosing to maintain maximum limits by appointments, you will enter the total number of services available for the entire day in this box here. When choosing by groomer, you will enter the maximum number of services to be scheduled in the employee section for each individual employee. The Grooming tab in System Options also gives us the chance to set default groom options. So when creating reservations, these services will automatically be checked when the new reservation is opened. While there are other settings in the System Options that control other aspects of appointments in Kennel Connection, they are involved with other functions such as packages or invoicing and are covered in more detail in other training videos. Before moving on to the schedules, we're going to take a brief look at the Lists section. And there are certain lists in the Lists section. There will be certain lists that will pertain directly to the creation of appointments. In the Breeds tab, we'll be able to set up boarding rates and grooming rates based on individual breeds. For daycare, we'll have either daycare rooms or types, depending on which one you're using, where you can set up the individual types of rooms or types and the rates applied to them. Next to that, we'll have exercises, feedings, and medications. This is where you can set up the individual services that you'll be applying to reservations when you create them. In locations where you record the location of the pet, run sizes and then runs can be created here as well. Normally you'll want to create your run sizes first and create your rates for them, and then create your runs, attach them to the run sizes, and then choose which module those runs will be applied to. The creation of other services is also done here. For any additional services beyond feeding, medication, exercises, they have to be entered here so they can be selected when creating a reservation. And if you're going to be creating packages as a way for customers to pay for reservations in advance, those packages can be created here as well. For more details on these settings, I do recommend the Kennel Connection training video on the Business Info, System Options, and Lists section, and the training video on creating and managing packages. Creation and management of appointments will take place mainly from the schedules available in Kennel Connection 6. To access most of these, we'll want to go to the Schedule tab. Now above the ribbon where we have the Schedule tab selected, you'll see the Quick Access bar. This is where a number of permanent icons reside, including icons for each of the modules you have running in your version of Kennel Connection. Clicking on any of these will open up a schedule on the screen. You can also open up schedules under the Schedule tab where larger icons for each module appear. There are a number of other schedules that can be used besides the module schedules, which appear here under calendars, but we're going to go through the main schedules first. As you can see, the schedules for the modules in Kennel Connection all look very similar. All module schedules in Kennel Connection follow the same grid format. Each one has its own color coding to display what is happening in your facility at any given time. I'm going to clear the screen here so we can take a look at one module specifically, and we're going to start with the boarding module. There are a number of ways to create reservations in the system. Next to the Schedules section under the Schedule tab, you'll see the Create Appointments section. Here we have an icon for each module with a little plus next to it, and by clicking on any of these, we can open up a blank reservation. When clicking on these buttons, you'll have to choose the customer or the pet by searching for the last name, the pet name, or a number of other search criteria. You can also create reservations from the pet card itself. If we open up a pet card, we'll notice that there is a tab for each module on the pet card. Under each module tab, we'll have a list of all reservations in the system, past, present, and future, which can be opened and modified from here. And we have an Add button, and clicking on this will open up a reservation. As you can see, the default date shows as the current date showing on the computer, and my default in time is showing as the current time now. From these module tabs in the pet card, you also have the ability to enter notes for pets, default items such as default boarding rates or run sizes in the case of boarding. For grooming, we can set default rates and default groomers. And you'll see different options that apply based on which module you're looking at. One option you'll find under all module tabs on a pet card is the ability to print an appointment list or email a list of future appointments to the customer. One of the easier ways to create appointments in Kennel Connection is to select the pet or the customer in the client view, click on them, and drag them into the schedule. Once you release them into the schedule, a reservation will automatically create itself with the pet selected, and then you can just start filling out the information for that reservation. If you select a customer and drag them over, and that customer has more than one pet, the system will bring open a MultiPet screen. Under this MultiPet screen, you'll choose which pet you want to create a reservation for, and if you choose more than one, those pets will all appear under a MultiPet Reservation screen where you can create the reservation for all the pets simultaneously. This is a time-saving feature to allow you to create reservations for multiple pets that are staying ostensibly for the same duration without having to create each reservation individually, especially if your customer has 4, 5, 6 pets. In a multi-pets booking situation, you will see a multi-pets tab appear at the far right. The multi-pets tab will give information on the reservation for each individual pet, depending upon the module you're creating those reservations for. In the case of boarding, for example, if we choose a run for the pets, the multi-pets tab will then show us those runs selected, any multi-pet rates applying, the multi-pet rates which are set up under the run size section in the list section. And from here, we can modify these rates if needed, or if we're booking multiple pets but we don't want to book them in the same run, we can make changes here as well. Also, when creating multi-pet reservations, under the Services tabs, you'll see a drop-down where we can select which pet we want to create services for. This allows us to add and modify individual services for each pet based on their individual stay. There are a number of settings when creating a reservation that will appear in most module reservation windows. When creating a reservation, we'll see the pet and customer information in the upper left-hand corner. The rate and box to enter initials of the employee creating the reservation will appear here, and the options to create an estimate or take a deposit for that reservation. When creating the reservation, you'll have the option to choose or modify the date and time, and standard options such as marking a reservation confirmed. We can add a booking to a wait list, we can mark a pet for pickup or delivery, and we can enter instructions for this booking. Reservations have the option to select services. These would be other services, feedings, medications, and exercises. As I mentioned before, you have the option to set up editable service grids, whereby if we have a service that the customer wants that we don't currently offer, but we want to add quickly, in this case, let's say I want to add pool time, but it's not been entered in the system yet, I can simply type in pool time and tab over. And once I've done that, pool time has been saved in the list section for exercises. And if I pull the drop down here, we'll see that pool time is now a selectable option. When setting up services for a reservation, the start date and end date will always default to the duration of the stay. So if my stay here was 4:26 to 4:30, the duration will default to the end date of 4:30. This can be modified manually, however, once I start setting up the initial service. MA&E for services stands for morning, afternoon, or evening. How much would be any kind of designation of measurement that you need to require for that. The rate will be the rate charged if you are charging for that service. This rate will be applied per instance, not per day. So if I have an afternoon and evening scheduled for this jog, and I'm charging $1 per jog, that's going to be $2 charged per day when I create my invoice. The rotation is 1 for every day, 2 for every other day, 3 for every third day, etc. Most modules have the option to set up a departure service. So if the pet is groomed or bathed or some other kind of departure service is set up for the individual pet before they leave at the end of their stay, you can set that departure service up here. Other services can also be applied to this. And depending on which module you're creating a departure service in, some will require that you enter a time for the departure service to make sure that it is not scheduled before the pet is scheduled to leave the main reservation. All reservations will have a vaccinations tab, and this displays vaccination information from the pet card. So if your customer is creating a reservation for their pet and they have updated vaccination information to give to you then, you can enter it while you're creating the reservation without having to exit and enter the information in or remember to do it afterwards. And then you also have the option to add inventory items to a reservation. So if you're selling something to a pet or a customer during the pet stay, but you don't want to bill them until you create the invoice at the end of the stay, adding the item here will cause it to apply to the invoice at the end of the stay automatically. And you can also add the employee if you are attaching employees' names to sold items for commissions. Once you've entered all the basic information for a reservation, click OK, and it will add it to the schedule. Now, in the case of this pet, I checked the Add to Wait List option, and I wanted to point this out first. If we go up to the Schedule tab, we'll see a wait list option. Kennel Connection has a separate wait list to record reservations. As you can see, the reservation I just made for Takashi here appears on the boarding tab of the wait list. There are two ways to create a waitlist reservation. One is the way I just did it, which is to create a reservation on the regular schedule and check the Add to Wish List box. Or drag and drop a pet or a customer into this waitlist schedule and create a reservation there. The waitlist is a separate schedule meant solely for creating reservations to hold until space becomes available or until the reservation is confirmed, depending on how you are trying to apply the waitlist. The system will not take pets from the waitlist and put them into a regular schedule automatically. It must be done manually. The way you move a reservation from the waitlist is to open up the reservation by double-clicking or selecting it and clicking the Modify button, going to the Add to Waitlist option and unchecking it. When we do that and click OK to save, now you'll see that that reservation has disappeared from the waitlist. And if we go back to the boarding schedule, we'll see that the previously saved reservation for Takashi has now appeared on the schedule. We can also see that the color coding shows that the pink for arriving today, and for the pickup option here, showing that the pet has to be picked up. The color coding will show you what's happening with the pet throughout the day. So if we go to check the pet in, the color coding will change to indicate that the pet has been picked up and has arrived at the facility. Checking in and checking out pets on the schedules can be done a number of certain ways. You can right-click on a schedule on an appointment and click the check-in option, or we can select the pet on the schedule and click the check-in box here under the Schedule tab, or we can select the check-in icon at the very top of the screen there. So if I right-click on the reservation and select check-in, in this case I have the options turned on to prompt for printing of the boarding contract or kennel card or the grooming contract, since we have a groom reservation there. We can turn these off in the system options section as well. And now you'll see the color coding has changed. We now have a dark blue showing the pet has been checked in. The picked up color coding has disappeared. The assumption is if you have checked the pet in, then they have obviously been picked up. And now the pet is color coded, showing that it has to be delivered at the end of the stay. While managing reservations in the schedule, right-clicking on the scheduled visit will give you a number of options. These options will vary slightly from module to module. At the top, we'll have the ability to add, modify, or delete reservations. We can open up the customer or pet card or a belongings report. The belongings report allows us to enter belongings that have been checked in with the pet and to remind us that those belongings must be returned to the owner with the pet at the end of the stay. We can also print the picture of the pet for quick identification. Print the screen, I should say. If you're using the Pet Detect collar printer, you can print the collar from here. We can enter notes, additional notes for feeding, exercise, medications. For boarding, we have the option for exercise checkout and check-in. Selecting this will allow you to check a pet out for an exercise and then check them back into the kennel. We can also create general booking notes. These are notes attached to the booking in general. And once booking notes are entered and saved, you will see a check mark appear in the notes column. And then those notes can again be accessed simply by right-clicking and going to booking notes. Like I mentioned before, we have the option to check in and check out. We can create an invoice from here if you're not going to create the invoice at check-in or checkout. We can print the contract from here. We can print the kennel card in the case of boarding, a report card, and then below that we'll have contact information. We can create the next appointment for this pet. We can cancel the reservation or undo the confirmation. Canceling will also remove this reservation from the schedule. It will gray out like a deleted reservation will if you are tracking deleted reservations, except the lettering will be in red. We can also undo that canceled option by right-clicking. And if you are tracking deleted reservations, opening up a deleted reservation from the schedule, will give you the option to rebook that reservation. And as I mentioned earlier, if you are tracking deleted reservations and you want to remove it from the schedule entirely, simply delete it again and it will go away. At the bottom of each module, you'll also see numbers telling you the current occupancy totals for that module. And each module also has the option to change the sort order of the schedule. So you can control which order the reservations are in to aid you in tracking the ins and outs of that module for the day. I want to very briefly go through the creation of a reservation for each module just to get an idea for what the feel is like on those. We just witnessed a boarding reservation. Moving on to the grooming reservation. Again, the basic information is roughly the same. The only difference with the grooming reservation is that we have the option to choose the individual services and the groomer that is applied to each service. For grooming, we can also create recurring appointments for every certain number of weeks, for a certain number of weeks, months, or years. Once we choose that, starting with the date of this reservation, the appointments will be created at every interval for the length that we have chosen here. We can also set up pickup and delivery notes for this reservation. And if you're using the mobile grooming option, you'll have the ability to choose whether this reservation is an in-house grooming or a mobile grooming. For daycare, we create a reservation in the daycare schedule. We'll see we can choose the daycare room. You also have the option to choose run sizes and runs for daycare, grooming, or boarding. Those can be chosen individually in the list section as we saw earlier. On the daycare reservation, we'll also have the ability to purchase a pet or a client package. It'll give us the total number of days currently available for that pet or customer package. We can also set up reoccurring daycare appointments by going to the reoccurring tab, choosing which days the pet will be staying during the week. We can assign departure services for those days and mark whether those days should be designated as half days. And we can choose the duration and whether these will be occurring every week or every other week. Also unique to the daycare module, we have the option to choose whether it is a half day or full day. By choosing the half day option, the rate at the top will change to the half day rate, which is set up in the list section. We can also choose whether or not to use a package day for this visit. So if your customer is using packages but they want to pay for this visit, you can uncheck this box. The box will be checked by default whenever creating a reservation. And if you want to offer the customer a comped daycare stay, you can check this box to do not charge for this visit. That will flag the reservation as not needing to be invoiced, so an invoice will not appear for that daycare visit. I'm going to cancel that so I don't create all those recurring appointments. Under pet sitting, creating a pet sitting reservation, we'll have the general information here, the date range, what kind of invoicing you'll be doing for this pet sitting, whether the invoice is created at the end of the entire reservation or on a weekly, bi-weekly, or monthly basis. We choose the individual days that the pet sitting will occur and then choose the date range. Under the Details tab, we'll choose pet sitting services that have been set up in the list section, whether or not there's a feeding occurring during that pet sitting visit, and the time of the visit. And again, we can choose the employee being assigned to that visit. When the visit is longer than 1 day, we'll have the option to set the first day visit, the last day visit, and all of those in between. To save time, once we create the first day, if it's going to remain the same for the entire scheduled visits, we can click this copy button, and this will just transfer all those services from the first day to all the between days and the last day. For the training module, there are 3 types of trainings on the training module: resident, one-on-one, and classes. You'll generally want to choose which type you're going to be scheduling for before creating the reservation. Classes for training are set up in the list section ahead of time, and pets can be added to them by dragging them into the schedule. And for class appointments, we're going to choose the class. The date range of that class is going to pop up. You can see this is an old class I haven't deleted, so the date range is older. If there's a rate applied to this training, it's going to appear here automatically. We can modify that if we want to. Other options here, similar to the other modules. We also have the paid option. If this has been paid already, we can mark that here. For one-on-one reservations, we can choose our in date and last date. When choosing a one-on-one or resident, we can jump back and forth between the two of them to make changes to that reservation. The rate will apply automatically, as mentioned before. If it is a resident training will appear on the training schedule as well as the boarding schedule. So the boarding rate will appear here as well once we choose the run that pet will be staying in. And if there's not one, you can add it manually. You'll enter your in and out times, the name of the trainer, other basic information that is similar on the other modules. For creating a one-on-one training, the same information is available except for adding it to a run in the boarding schedule. The special services module is a module we've created to allow you to create and schedule your own services that fall outside of the realm of the feeding, medication, exercises, or the other services, and also to allow the scheduling of activities for pets that might not fit within the realm of our other modules. The little icon is of a swimming pool, so one of the main examples we can give is if you have pool time at your facility and you have the option for people to bring their pets into the pool themselves, or if you're scheduling it for individual pets. And unlike the other modules in the system, you can schedule a pet multiple times during the same day. Creating a special services appointment, you choose the date of the services and choose the services here. And if we have more than one service occurring during the day, we can enter the individual times for them. So if you have a pet coming in for multiple pool visits during a day, you could set it for the 10 a.m., the 1 p.m., and the 3 p.m. Again, just as an example, again, the employee attached to that reservation can be added here. And we can also set reoccurring as well, just like in daycare, choosing the days of the week and the duration of that reoccurring appointment. Some of the schedules in Kennel Connection overlap. We saw that with the training module, where we could create training appointments that also appear on the boarding schedule. For example, if I try to open this reservation, it's going to tell me that this pet, even though it's on the boarding schedule, has been added through the training module, so we have to go to the training module in order to make modifications to that stay. However, that training pet, which is a residential training, will also appear on the boarding schedule so we know where that pet is and that the pet is actually staying in the boarding facility while it's being trained. One of the other overlapping options in Kennel Connection is between boarding, daycare, and grooming. And I'm going to open up all the screens here just so I can jump around a little bit to give a quick demonstration of this. We can create a boarding reservation for a pet. And in this boarding reservation, we can click the Add the Daycare option. This brings up the Set button, and this allows us to add daycare stays for the pet to the daycare schedule simultaneously while we're creating the boarding appointment. So during the pet's stay, I can choose which days I want the pet to stay for daycare as well. We can choose the daycare type, and we can choose whether or not to use packages for this visit or whether or not to charge. One important thing to keep in mind is the add to daycare option is only for creating daycare appointments while creating a boarding appointment. It's a time-saving device, so you don't have to open up multiple modules if you have a pet that you're going to be adding to boarding and daycare simultaneously. Once you create those reservations, you cannot go back into the daycare visits through the set button to modify them. Once you create the initial daycare visits through the boarding reservation, they must be modified on the daycare schedule individually. So the set button and the add daycare button are only meant for when you're initially creating daycares at the same time that you're creating the boarding stay. Now, in addition to this, we mentioned the departure services, and we can choose departure services to add for this pet. Now, once I save this boarding appointment, I'm also going to be saving the departure services and the daycare that I've added. And as I said before, in some cases, you'll be asked to add the departure service time to make sure that it's not being added after the pet is meant to be checked out. So now we see that Terry has been added to the schedule for boarding. If we go to the daycare schedule and click the refresh button, we'll see that Terry has been added to the daycare schedule as well. And if we go to the grooming schedule and navigate to the final day of that visit, we'll see that Terry has a grooming reservation as well, and it is color-coded dark blue to indicate that it is a departure service. Now, very important in this setup is that if you add a daycare visit through the boarding schedule, the pet must be checked in and out of the daycare schedule in order for the daycare visits to apply to the invoicing at the end of the boarding stay. So this pet will be checked in and out every day, and we'll say no to creating an invoice. We're doing that so we can invoice for all the daycares at once at the end of the boarding stay. And I'll just do a couple of these for that demonstration. Now on the grooming schedule, we want to check the pet in for the grooming. Once the pet is checked in, we have options for marking that the pet has been groomed. We can check the pet out, or if we don't want to check the pet out until the pet actually leaves the facility, in this case when it is checked out of the boarding stay, we can mark the reservation as completed. This will color code it to a bright green indicating the pet has been serviced but is still in the facility. Or we can leave it unmarked and just show that the pet is still in. Once we reach the end of the boarding stay and we check this pet out, of course I have to check it in the boarding first, so let's do that. Once we check Terry out, and you'll notice the system is asking me if it's an early checkout because the time of the checkout does not match the time on the computer. In this case, I'm going to say no for the purposes of this demonstration. Once it says checkout is successful, do I want to create an invoice? And I say yes. The invoice that's created, and again, it's asking me if it's an early day. I'm going to say no. The invoice has the boarding stay. It has the groom and the bath service from the groom schedule. And it has some past ones here as well. And then here are the daycare visits. There's a past one and then there's a current one. Past one was not invoiced, that's why that's showing up. And then we have the special services I applied for Terry as well on a previous reservation that was not invoiced. If items that have not been invoiced in the past are going to show up on a current invoice, you want to keep an eye out for that as well. So everything that I scheduled for this visit has been invoiced through here. And now Terry shows as having been checked out of the system. And if I go to the grooming schedule, since I had a departure service and I refresh the grooming schedule, the departure service has been checked out of the grooming schedule. This will occur for boarding departure services and daycare departure services. So the pet needs to be checked in, but you do not have to check the pet out. You can just leave the pet unchecked out or mark them as completed until you check them out of the other schedule to which the grooming was a departure service. Now, briefly, I want to go over other options for managing appointments through Kennel Connection. The module schedules themselves are very handy at keeping track of who's in the system and what's going on. The color coding and the sort orders on the individual schedules give you flexibility over just keeping an eye on what's happening. The color coding especially can make it easy at a glance to tell what's happening in the system as far as pets coming and going. But there are other options under the Schedule tab we can look at here. When you're creating boarding reservations, you'll have the option to look at the run glance or the month glance. The month glance is going to give us occupancies for the entire month with a 2-week window throughout the month-long period. Little X's will appear next to each run indicating that the run is filled. This gives you a handy snapshot of how full your facility currently is. And if you're using runs for modules other than boarding, you can choose the individual module from the drop-down up here. The run glance gives similar information, but with more detail. In the run glance, we can see color coding showing the arrivals, departures, items like that, and the names of the pets scheduled show as well. From here, we also have the option to move pets. So if you're trying to maximize your occupancies during the busy season, we can select a pet and click the Move Pet option. This will open up a list of the dates and the run for that pet. What you want to do is choose the days that the pet is going to be moved. Then select the run you want to move the pet to. When you do this, the check boxes will be on the left indicating the days the pet's being moved. You'll have the move from run being the current run and the move to run being the run you're moving the pet to. Also under the Schedule tab to the far left in the Calendar section, we have the Vacancy Schedule. The Vacancy Schedule gives a list of all vacancies in the system and some other useful information. At the top, you're going to see a row for each run size, and each column indicating the date of the month, and each column is going to show you what your vacancies are for that run size for the day. So in this case, I have 7 runs available in the large run size and 1 in the small run size. The parentheses next to the run size indicates the total number of runs available in that run size. Below that, we'll have a number of total pets boarded on that day, total number of pets leaving the facility on that day, total pets scheduled to stay overnight that day into the next day, total number of vacancies, total number of pets scheduled for daycare, grooming, and special services. Then we have a number of calendar views that can be used to keep track of reservations outside of the module schedules. First, opening up the calendar view, this gives us a full month view. You have a tab for each module in the system. Each module tab has a series of numbers on each date. The legend for what these numbers mean shows to the right of the month at the top. In the case of boarding, for example, we're looking at numbers indicating number of runs booked, number of cats, number of NRAs, and number on the wait list. For the current day, we see a list of all the individual pet names, and by double-clicking on one of these pets, we can open them up. And then from that pet card, you can go to the individual module tabs there. To create reservations from the calendar view, simply select the day you want to create a reservation for, drag that pet or customer into the schedule calendar, and a reservation is going to appear for that day for that pet for the module that we have selected in the system. So if we're on the Daycare tab, we can create a daycare appointment by simply dragging the pet over, and that reservation will be created for the day that's currently selected on the schedule, which in this case is the 27th. Then we have the weekly schedule, which I find is more useful for the grooming module and more time-sensitive scheduling like the special services schedule. You'll see that the Reservations appear on the schedule with the name of the pet. Color coding appears here as well. The reservations on the calendar schedule cannot be dragged into different days of the week, but we can modify the in and out times by dragging the top or bottom of the reservation, which is useful for micromanaging your times for your employees. Double-clicking on this reservation block will open up the reservation for modification. We can also create reservations from the schedule by clicking on the date and time we want to schedule on, dragging the pet or the customer into the schedule. The reservation that pops up will be for the date and time selected on the calendar. There's a tab at the top so we can switch to individual modules, and in the cases of certain modules such as grooming, we can choose which groomer we're looking at as well, and if you have mobile grooming, which zone. Finally, we have the full day view. The full day view gives us all the modules you currently have in Kennel Connection, with a snapshot of arrivals and departures for boarding, and the pets that are currently scheduled in daycare, grooming, pet sitting, etc. While you cannot drag and drop a pet or customer into the schedule to create reservations, right-clicking on a reservation in the program will give us the Add option, which will allow us to search for the customer or pet and create the reservation just like it would if we had clicked the Add button under Create Appointments at the top. Navigating all of the schedules in Kennel Connection is done with these buttons at the top. And just to bring the boarding up as an example to show the difference between the two, each calendar or schedule view has a previous and next day button as well as a find date button, so you can go back and forth between the days or navigate to a specific day. To make life easier, clicking the find date option, the date that initially shows will always default to the current day to make it easier to get back to the current day schedule if you're jumping around to make or manage reservations. Each schedule has the print option. This will print out a log showing all of the pets scheduled for that day on the schedule. We also have the add, modify, delete options here on the module schedules. And refresh and close. The refresh option is to make sure that the schedule is currently showing the latest information from the database. This is mainly useful if you're using Kennel Connection on a network with multiple computers running the program simultaneously. The schedule will refresh every time an action takes place. Every time a pet is checked in, a reservation is created, the date is moved, the schedule will refresh all the data to show the latest information from the database. If, however, you're on a computer on a network and you are not doing anything on your screen, you are idle, yet someone else is managing, creating, deleting, modifying reservations on a separate computer, if you have not refreshed your screen, you may not see the latest changes done on other computers in the network. So if you are using Kennel Connection on multiple computers, I do recommend if you experience a length of inactivity on your screen, you might just want to refresh that schedule before taking into consideration the information showing to make sure you're looking at the latest information from the database. And when managing appointments in Kennel Connection, there are a number of reports under the Reports tab that can prove useful depending on the module you're in. We do have a separate training video specifically on the report section that I highly recommend, and that goes through each report and explains what they do in the system. But to give you a brief idea of what we're discussing here, under the Reports tab, you will see that we have a Reports section for each module in the system, and each one will have specific reports you can run, many of them useful towards managing your day-to-day operations from that schedule. As an example, under the Boarding tab, we have reports regarding packages, the log that shows us arrivals or departures. We can print out service reports for departure services, for exercises, feedings, medications, to view or print schedules for those services for the day or a future date on the module schedule. We have options for keeping track of occupancy in the modules and sending reminders to customers of future appointments. There are many options in all these reports for these. Once again, I do recommend the reports training video for more details on these individual items. This has been the training video for creating and managing appointments in Kennel Connection 6. I hope you found this training video informative and useful. If you have any other questions regarding what has been gone over in this video, please feel free to contact the training department at Blue Crystal Software by calling 888-486-4343 and asking for the training department. Or you can email us at training@bluecrystalsoftware.com. Also, be sure to check out our other training videos on YouTube. If you have any suggestions for future training videos, please contact us and let us know.